Welcome to the Agent Bridge podcast. We're your hosts, Brandon Baca.
And I'm Marl Hessen.
The Agent Bridge is the proven path to real estate success without the burnout. Okay, episode 9. I thought, RL, before we jump into some of the content here, we could talk a little bit about the market. I think it's relevant because there's been a lot of upheaval in the marketplace over the past few months. You know, that certainly has hit us, just like it's hit lots of other brokerages and lots of other real estate companies. And so I think people are trying to decipher what's going on. Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? All of that stuff. So, you know, I thought we could maybe talk about that a little bit. And one of the things that I'll encourage you guys, you real estate agents, is like the economy, right? You have your own personal economy that you can affect right now. So you have to be able to shift. You have to be able to do things differently. You have to be willing to do things differently than have been done in the past. And that's one of the things, like, you know, that I've been talking to our agents about, is it's really about going back to fundamental real estate activities to generate income, right? To generate closings, to generate your pipeline. So it's really like your salvation in a market like this where things are uncertain is your process.
That's right. I mean, we've talked about that a number of times now. It's no longer can you just wait for those deals to fall into your lap. It's a process, and it starts with lead generation, and it starts with daily activity. And if you're not starting now, you're going to be behind the next month.
Right. You can't just depend, you know, things aren't going to fall in your lap anymore. You might, right? You might have a deal or two fall in your lap, but for those of you who are, you know, this is a big part of your income, and this is something that you know, supports your family. It's really in those daily habits. Are you setting 2 appointments per day with people who can buy or sell homes? And so, you know, it's just important to remember that. And, you know, the reality of it is markets go up and markets go down. You know, being in this for 15 years, and you've been an investor for, you know, 15, there's always somebody buying houses.
Well, and that's what I was about to say is I don't care how bad the market gets. There are agents that do well, no matter the market, and be one of those agents. Right. And it's all you have to do is your daily activity, and you will be there. You might not be having the best year of your career. That's okay. Yeah. You can still survive. The market's interesting. I mean, obviously it's unprecedented on the back end of not only are we possibly entering a recession, but we've got this pandemic we just dealt with, all of these factors. But I can tell you this, the market will get better. Yeah. We don't know exactly how long that's going to be. I think the rates are going to get better in early 23. They've already started to fall down, but in early 23, I think significantly better. And that can only generate some new business. It's not going to make the market worse. So even if prices go down 10%, I mean, they were up, 30%. So everything's going to be fine. Do these things we're telling you to do, and you'll be there.
Yeah, exactly. And, just as a word of encouragement, when be open to, when we're having these conversations with people and you're in your appointments, you're going to start to see trends in who you're talking to as buyers or sellers, right? And one of the things that happened when I first went full-time in real estate business, which is around I think 2011. So I had done a couple of years part-time with another sales job, but coming in full-time in 2011, I had a pool of investors that I worked with, and we would pick up 1 to 2 houses from investment properties as they were building their investment portfolio. So you'll start to notice if you're out there doing what you're supposed to do, you're gonna have your ear to the ground, and you're gonna see the trends before they happen, and so you can take advantage of them.
Yeah, and building's been way behind since like 2008. Even it's been way behind. So and they've never caught up. So get in with a builder. They're gonna have to keep building.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
didn't do open houses. All right, so we're going to jump in. So episode 9 is common buyer mistakes. So or working with buyers, where I see agents mess this up in their process of working with buyers. So again, you've done all the work to source leads, whether that be through your SOI, even if you do a lead source, which we don't recommend if you're a new agent. You don't need to really be buying lead sources. But what I will tell you is the number one is when somebody improperly assesses the buyer's stage. So this is the buyer that's got somebody running around everywhere. And I made this mistake. I probably have told this story before. Forgive me. But, I had a buyer that like every single weekend they would take out and they go look at 5 to 10 houses every single weekend with no real need to buy, but they just liked going to look at houses. And at some point I just had to stop doing it.
If you say you've never made this mistake, then I'm sorry, but you're lying. Like everyone has made this mistake. Everyone gets excited, whether it's your first lead or your first big month or whatever it is. You just started buying leads maybe, and now you're excited about the first few that came in. Everybody's made this mistake, but you don't have to. If you follow kind of the steps that we've outlined around aspirational research and transactional leads,
That's right.
you will be able to determine what stage they're in, and you will be able to spend the appropriate amount of time with that potential buyer.
Yeah, exactly. And if this is the first podcast that you're listening to, your aspirational lead sources are those, those people who look for fun. They're like, they like looking at houses. They go to open houses every weekend, but they don't have a reason to buy. The research buyer is the person who does have a reason, but the timing's not quite right. So they're researching neighborhoods that they want to live in. And then your transactional buyer typically has a life event that's causing them to buy right now. So that's typically working in that 0 to 6 month time frame. So you have to be honest with where that buyer is and what is the life event that's going on that's causing them to buy a house.
You will get better at identifying this stage.
Yeah.
That takes some practice. It takes asking the right questions. It takes, listening, and not only just listening, but listening and really hearing what they're actually saying. Because sometimes what they're saying is not actually what they mean, and you have to decipher it. So you will get better at that. That's a skill set. It takes time, but it'll pay off.
One of the best questions you can just ask is, hey, what's your ideal scenario or what's your ideal timeline? And then that way people basically, you ask that question and they tell you when they plan to move.
Yeah.
Right. That's going to help you, do appropriate action to follow up and or show them houses. Because if somebody comes to me and they go, I said, hey, what's your timeline? Well, we're thinking about doing something next spring. And I say, no, not a problem. I said, let's just kind of keep our eye on the market, drive through some neighborhoods. When you get a chance, I said, the problem with going to look at houses is that everything that we go look at now is going to be gone.
Yeah.
Right. So that way it's like you can kind of get a really good idea from dropping into some open houses or looking in the neighborhood.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that are happy to have you drive them around looking at houses when they have no intention to buy. So you can't just ask, are you serious right now? They're going to say yes. Yeah. It's asking human down to earth questions like, hey, what's your ideal timeline? Well, grandma's coming into town for holidays, so we don't want to be, in upheaval now, but maybe after. And you'll start to figure out like how to ask the right questions that generate real human responses, not I'm just going to say what I want them to hear right now because I want to go look at houses.
Right. Okay. The other one is that's why, what we're talking about is the reason you do a buyer consultation. So buyer consultation is basically when you're sitting down with the buyers and you're talking to them about how this all works, right? How the process of buying a home works. It's incredibly important and for a couple of reasons. The first is if you're trying to communicate to someone, when you're out showing houses and you're talking to the buyer about process, they're not thinking about the process. They're thinking about the house.
Yep.
They're thinking about where's my furniture going to fit and, where is, Junior's room going to be? Okay. So you have to talk to them apart from the house. Now, sometimes people don't like to do a buyer consultation because it maybe feels too formal or too serious, or they feel like they're going to have to sign paperwork or something like that. So one of the things that I did in the process is if I had somebody that was a little bit resistant to a buyer consultation, we'd set up showings. I said, hey, meet me at the Starbucks right around the corner at such and such time, just for 15 minutes so we can kind of go over how everything works.
Yeah. And
then that usually was a suitable enough, period of time for us to kind of get things straight in terms of how the process works. And another reason why is because what I found across the years is the houses that are in high demand are usually going to multiple offer, even in markets like this. And so I wanted them to be prepared for the multiple offer situation because if I'm trying to talk them in, like if I'm trying to talk them into writing offers at or above asking price in a multiple offer situation when they've already selected the house, it might feel like I am trying to manipulate them.
Yeah. Oh, he just wants more, commission.
Right. He just wants more commission. He's going to make me overpay for the house, so on and so forth. I liked to have that discussion before because I'd be like, because I could say, when we get into multiple offer situations, this is what I see. When I tell you you're going to have to go at or above, your defense mechanism, right, or your thought process might be Brandon's just trying to make more commission, or he was going to make me overpay the house. But I can tell you through experience, this is what happens.
Yep.
So things like that, little nuances, or the things like that I would tell them is sleeping on it, because they would always be like, well, let me sleep on it. And I would tell them in the buyer consultation, I said, the house that you sleep on and make an offer on tomorrow is a house somebody else slept on last night is making an offer on today.
Yep.
Because if you want it, if you want that house, the typical reality is that someone else wants it too.
Yes.
So
I mean,
anyway, I like to talk about all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're seeing right now is, and we've talked about this before as well, is once the house is priced appropriately, people had lofty goals, but once a house is priced appropriately, they're still moving so fast because the inventory is still low.
Yeah. We're still seeing multiple offers on houses that are priced right.
Absolutely.
That are in certain price ranges. So yeah, even in, everybody's kind of got the idea that the market is swinging and that everything is just going down in value like a rocket, but that's not true. It's just when people price appropriately and they are the best house on the market in that price range, is going to sell. So yeah, make sure that they understand all of those things in that consultation, so that way you can have an effective buyer process. The other part of the buyer consultation, and this is a little bit nuanced too, is working a client into the pre-approval stage too late. Okay? Because sometimes we don't like to ask people, we don't want to push them, right? But the reality of it is people need a pre-approval right before we start shopping for houses. Now, with one caveat, if it's the first time you're talking to a buyer or you haven't met them yet, I say go on one little showing expedition before you ask them about the pre-approval, because that could maybe turn people off.
Yeah, I could get on board with one or two showings without a pre-approval, but this game has changed since COVID. We used to be able to submit offers without a pre-approval letter. That is gone. It almost universally people ask, when you submit me an offer, it needs to come with a pre-approval letter.
Right.
So that's one. Two, you as the agent have no idea what they can afford to buy. I can't tell you how many people have sent me, an agent has sent me someone that says, hey, we're going to look at $600,000 houses. I'm like, well, they can afford 300.
Yeah.
And I'm a licensed lender, so I can tell you right now, they can't afford the $600,000 house. So stop wasting your time.
Yeah. Or somebody might be under their price range, or they don't understand, because people aren't sitting around thinking about, hey, this price range house is going to cost me this much per month. And when they understand that process, or they understand how the financing works, or they get an idea, a lot of times I can get them excited and can push their price range up. So it works both ways.
And it does. And it also tells you how serious this buyer is. It's a way to determine their stage, because if you've been showing someone houses for a couple weeks now and they refuse to talk to a lender or to get pre-approved, they're not that serious.
Right.
They're not.
That's right.
So having those discussions where you're sharing bank statements, sharing W-2s, that elevates the level of importance, and it will tell you where they sit.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the ways is how you ask this question, the pre-approval question, because a lot of people, if you ask them, are you pre-approved? It's like asking them, do you have money, right?
Yep.
Which can be perceived as rude. So the way to ask them, I found, is, hey, are you guys pretty happy with the lender you're using? So I'm assuming that they're already working with a lender. And then probably about 50% of the time, they'll say, well, actually, I haven't talked to anybody yet. I said, great, let me get you to my preferred lender. Or they might say, excuse me. They might say, well, yeah, we are talking with this lender. We have talked with this lender. And that's also a reason for me to have an open and honest discussion with them about using the right lender. And this is, kind of gets us into understanding, like having a good vendor bench in terms of lenders, title companies, places like that. But I just like to say, hey, are you guys happy with the lender you're working with? And then whatever their answer is, working them into that pre-approval stage, getting that pre-approval letter. And that way we can understand. And I'll tell them, it's like the best thing about it is we know exactly where you are in the market and we can go shop in that.
And noticed how Brandon phrased that. You don't say, so he said, are you happy with the lender you're using? And then moved right into, let me share you my lender's contact information. So he didn't say, do you mind if would you like for me to share this information? He just said, let me do it. And then he's sending it on, because if getting the information in their hands is important, but then also getting it in your preferred lender's hands so they can follow up, because not only do people don't realize that you can shop with almost an unlimited amount of lenders within a 30-day period, and you're only going to hit their credit score once.
Right.
So they need to be shopping that. It's the biggest decision they're going to make, and it could potentially have a big impact. I mean, oftentimes we're beating rates out there by a full percent. Yeah. So it makes a difference.
Well, one of the things though that I understood very early on is that the lending process, or having a good lender, was such a massive part of creating a smooth transaction. Because I don't want to have to worry about the lending part of it. Right. And if I've got a lender that's constantly pulling me back into it, it's really frustrating, and it causes a lot of uncertainty for the buyer if they're not very organized. If that lender's not very organized, not doing their follow-up communication the right way. I want them to be a part of the team. And that way I'm just creating basically a white glove experience for my clients. So having the right lender is a massive part of that for me. I would just say it's so stinking important to have people that are on your team helping you pull this transaction along.
If I put my agent hat on, in an ideal scenario, I want to hear when they're pre-approved, and that any sort of only milestones. That's all I ever want to hear from a lender. Right. Are they submitted to processing? Are they clear to close? That's basically it. I mean, that's all I want to hear from a lender.
Right.
From a lender perspective, I only want to be sharing information at the milestones. If I'm having to ask for this or ask for that, or pull you into situations with the buyer, then I'm not doing my job appropriately, to be quite honest. I mean, there are some agents that like a little bit more detail here and there, and you just have to learn who those are, but that's the lender's problem, not your problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you've got the right lender. I can highly recommend Ownership Mortgage with R.L. Hessen. All right. The other thing is, when you're shopping, not giving the buyers breathing room on either side of their price range. What I have found is typically when buyers start the process, where they start is not where they finish in terms of neighborhood, price range. It can go up or down. I've actually gotten feedback before from a client that said, hey, why didn't you tell me about, and this is going to happen to you as an agent. Why didn't you tell me about this house that came on the market? And I'll say, well, it's not in your price range that you told me. And they're like, well, we need to know about, because we would have paid an extra $20,000, $30,000 for that house. That's happened so much. So you have to give some breathing room on either side, high or low, and also breathing room on the neighborhood. It's like when they say, hey, I want to be in this neighborhood, I'm doing adjacent neighborhoods as well, right? In their property search.
Yep.
Just because, and once you get really good, you probably are going to know exactly where they're going to move. You'll know exactly what neighborhood they're going to move to, and so they may tell you this one, but you know they're going to move to this one over here, and so you create a little bit of a broader search. So you have to. That's a little nuance, but
this is why I actually don't like the pricing. So I know Walmart and everyone out there likes to do the 99 cents or $1.99 instead of $2. Yeah. If it's a visual thing. This is why I don't like the $399,999 pricing strategy for real estate agents, because so many agents, when they run when they run searches, they run from 400 to 600 or 300 to 500. They don't run from 299,999 to 500. So I hate that pricing strategy. Just drop it in a normal bucket, and I think you'll catch more buyers. But that's another reason why you search on either side, because you just never know exactly how that house is priced. You never know if it's been sitting on the market. There might be a house out there that's been sitting on the market for 170 days, and it's 50,000 out of their price range, but maybe they'd take whatever it is that their price range was.
Well, and just in a lot of scenarios, people, I would say more often than not, once we've kind of got their price range established or where they want to go, because they'll get a pre-approval. A lot of people will get a pre-approval, and they're going to go, well, I want to stay at, let's say they got a pre-approval for 400, but they want to stay at 350. Guess what house they're buying? They're buying a house for 375 to 400, or maybe seeing if they can squeeze to 405, because it's planted, and they're just going to be looking. So typically the price that they think things are going to be and the house that they want do not align. And so they typically find very quickly that they're going to have to up their price range to get what they want.
Yeah, that's why those all those HGTV shows start off like showing them the house that's out of their price range but ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, well, that's right. And we did that one time. I had a realtor who was on my team in Oklahoma, and she said, I cannot find these clients the right house in their price range. I'm just not finding it. And I said, stop. Go find the house that they want, and who cares about the price range? Send that to them. And they ended up buying it.
Yeah.
It was a scenario where they're like, yeah, this is everything that we want. And I think it was like $40,000 or $50,000 more, and they went for it.
Not only do you need to give them breathing room, though, you need to be honest with them. If they come to you and they say, I want a 2-car garage, 3-bedroom, 3-bath with an acre lot, in Franklin, you're like, and they're like, I want to spend $300,000. You're like, okay, well, that's a $750,000 to $900,000 house. So we're out of the ballpark here.
Right. So just, be a little more open, pay attention to what they want, right? Or what's going to meet their need, and not necessarily what they're telling you.
Yeah.
All right. So the other thing is, back to having a good vendor bench, when you're talking about having a good lender, having a good title company, having a good inspector, having a good contractor to maybe help you solve some problems or price some repairs appropriately. All of that stuff is really, really important, because you want to create a seamless transaction. And what happens when you're using the right lender that's on your team, the right title company, the communication gets smoothed out, which I feel is one of the bigger parts of the transaction. Because if my title company rep, Andrea, has worked with RL, has worked with my TC, like all of that stuff, they all know how they communicate together. And so it makes that process a lot more seamless. And they know each other on a personal level too. So there's not this distance in terms of relationship. It's like everybody sort of knows each other. They've been working together, and it makes it really smooth. And the client, they solve a lot of problems before they come up.
Yeah. A lot of times people think like the closing company doesn't matter. It does. Like I can't tell you how many closings as a lender have been delayed because the title company reached out to the HOA one time, but didn't follow up to find out, HOA estoppel information, or, didn't get the lender title policy back in time and never kind of bird dogged that. And there's a lot of things that the title company can have impact on that people don't realize. And those staying in communication with the lender and with the agent and with the TC is ultra important.
Yeah. And I didn't mean for this to be a commercial, but one of the reasons we like to use closed title with Andrea Steinman, because there's so many options in terms of like closing. So that's super easy for my client, because they can do digital closing, or they can do a remote. I just had some clients close in Arizona today for a house here, but we arranged a mobile notary. They can do the online closing. I don't have to run around and get earnest money, right? Because that's all done electronically, and it's synced with my transactional system. So, if you don't know about closed title, Andrea Steinman, reach out to her. She's great.
I did the loan on that one. It was so smooth. It would we took the application and were clear to close in like 7 days. And a lot of that was on Andrea too. Like she helped like get the HOA information, like I was just talking about. Like those types of things where everybody's in communication. I know her well. She knows me. I know the TC that I've been working with. I know the agent very well as well, Becky. Yeah. So that's just one of those scenarios where, because we're all talking and because we all know each other, we can weed through a lot of the details a lot more quickly.
Right. Now, here's another one that I'm going to talk about, which is having the right inspector. Okay. Because the inspection process is the number one deal killer in a transaction. And having an inspector that is not a drama queen, because of what we've had inspectors that are drama queens before, and they will completely kill a deal. That I've had an inspector go, I wouldn't buy this house, or and they think that they're doing it from some place of virtue, but the reality of it is like everything is going to be fixed, can be fixed, right? The other thing is, if a seller has a major problem in the home, they're going to have to fix it anyway, right? Because it becomes a required disclosure when they put it back on the market.
That's right.
So I like an inspector who comes in with a cool head, that is not really interested in giving a bunch of opinions, but basically presenting the information in a way that is understandable, that's low drama, that just says, hey, here's the problem, and this is again, everything can be fixed.
Yeah, a buyer needs to walk into a scenario knowing everything can be fixed and knowing kind of a ballpark of what, and this is why you would have a good contractor as well, a ballpark of what they stand to from a cash outlay perspective. And then a good agent can go back and maybe possibly negotiate for some of that stuff, because again, they will have to disclose it on the next one. So, that's all you need to know. And you don't need to have an inspector that's saying, hey, I wouldn't buy this house. This is terrible. I couldn't believe the builder actually got away with this, or yada, yada. Everything can be fixed. And that's the gist of it. And finding any major problems, that's what you really want to know, is like, are there major foundational issues, stuff like that.
Yeah. We'll get into that in another podcast, but basically, yeah, you're looking for major electrical plumbing. Is the roof insurable? HVAC, foundation, and I think that's it, right? So those are okay, yeah.
And then it's just having a good general contractor, or knowing individual plumbers, roofers, things like that you can call to say, hey, this roof's not terrible shape, but it needs some work. Like, what are we talking, 2,000 or 8,000? And then kind of getting some general ideas to the buyer. And then you kind of have an idea of where you need to go back and negotiate, or where they might need to come out of pocket at the end.
Yeah, just having a place to go get the information from a trusted source is hugely important. Yeah. Okay, this is another one. When agents don't talk to the other agent on the phone.
This is so frustrating.
It really is, because I think because we've become an increasingly digital society, that people don't like to pick up the phone and call anybody anymore, and so they'll do a bunch of texting. I think there's so much more you can learn about the scenario when you're calling about it, whether it's a listing or all of that stuff. Just pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah. Now, we have taught that you do need to start with an offer. Like, you can't try to negotiate the whole offer on the front end on a phone call before submitting. You do have to start with an offer, but I think like you said, there's so much that can be learned. Like, if you have a client that's in a certain situation and you kind of want to understand where the sellers are at, pick up the phone and call, because guess what? The other agent wants this deal to close too.
Yeah.
And you guys can solve a number of problems before they ever become a problem if you just talk on the phone. And I have so many agents that don't ever want to pick up the phone. They want to try to solve everything through back and forth, through email, through texting, or whatever. You can hash it out with a 5-minute phone call.
That's absolutely right. And, I'll even call if I've got let's say I'm out with buyers and I find a listing that they like, and we're sort of narrowing it down. On the way to the next house, I'll call the agent and be like, hey, you have anything working on that house? I've got some clients who are potentially interested in it. Just wanted to know. And I can get some information from that realtor, and it's a personal conversation. So a lot of times they'll share things that they wouldn't have shared via text.
Yeah.
Just from a person-to-person perspective. So
and you can also pick up things that they aren't saying, like how desperate they are.
Right.
Like there's
you
things
can hear
like
little nuances in the voice. Yeah.
Maybe you were going to start at 10 grand under, but maybe based on the conversation, you might start 20 grand under.
Yeah.
But it's pick up the phone and call.
Absolutely. So, again, to sort of recap on this episode here, just make sure that you are properly assessing the buyer stage. Where are they? Don't waste your time with someone who's not ready to buy. That doesn't mean don't stay in contact with them. That doesn't mean don't be of service to them, but don't spend, 4 hours on a Saturday showing them 20 houses. Okay. Make sure you're doing the buyer consultation. Make sure that you're working them into the pre-approval stage at the right time so that they can understand and you can understand, and so you can search with knowledge and wisdom. All right. And the other one is make sure you've given them breathing room on either side of their price range and around the neighborhood. Make sure you have a good vendor bench. and make sure you're picking up the phone and talking to the other agent. Okay, so let's talk about real quick again, if you haven't been to the Agent Bridge on YouTube, please go like this episode, or if you're here, like and subscribe to our to that. Any other channels they need to go check us out on? Yeah.
So if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, we're also putting those podcasts in video form on YouTube. So definitely go check those out. Make sure you subscribe and like us on those different podcast platforms, whichever you use. If you like the podcast, please leave us a review. It's helpful. And again, our website is out there if you need some information on the Agent Bridge. We're constantly hosting webinars, other activities. So just make sure you get on our newsletter list.
Yeah, and also leave a comment. Tell us what you want to know, and ask questions. We'd love to read you some of our listeners' comments here and help you solve your problems.
Yeah, we're almost 10 episodes deep. So if there's something you want to hear about, we'd love to put it together for you.
All right, you guys, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.